June Logan hated getting up early, but today she woke up half an hour before her alarm. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, painting artistic patterns on the wall. The 30-year-old woman stretched in bed and smiled. In just a few hours, she would be flying toward her dream. 2 weeks in Maui, Hawaii. 2 weeks away from the office, reports, and endless meetings. 2 weeks with the man she loved more than her own life. The suitcase had already been packed yesterday. June stood up and stepped in front of the mirror. Her brown eyes looked back at her with a mischievous sparkle. Her long auburn hair fell over her shoulders in soft waves. The light tan from the tanning salon made her even more attractive before the vacation. "You did it, June. Now you deserve a little happiness," she whispered to her reflection. The phone on the nightstand vibrated. A message from Silas. "Good morning, darling. See you at the airport. Check in at 10:30 a.m. I can't wait to be alone with you." June smiled. Every message from him made her heart beat faster. Silas Keller, the husband of her boss, Karina, was the man with whom she would spend her dream vacation. Their romance had begun 6 months ago at the company party. Karina was on a business trip at the time, and Silas had come to the party alone. Tall, with piercing gray eyes and a charming smile, he immediately caught June's attention. She never would have thought she'd fall in love with a married man, let alone her supervisor's husband. But after a few glasses of champagne, they started talking, and June saw in him a soulmate, someone who truly understood her. "I'm unhappy with her," Silas confessed back then. "We've been living like roommates for a long time. Karina only thinks about work, about her career. I don't matter to her." From that evening on, everything took its course. Secret meetings after work, messages they deleted immediately, calls from the work phone to leave no trace. June knew she was doing wrong. At North Star Inc. in Chicago, where she had worked as a financial analyst for 5 years, Karina Keller was the CEO and her direct supervisor. The domineering, ambitious, always impeccably dressed woman struck fear into her subordinates. No one dared to contradict her or question her decisions. But love was stronger than fear. When Silas suggested they travel together for 2 weeks, June agreed without hesitation. They had planned everything meticulously. Karina would be traveling to an international conference in Singapore. 2 weeks of freedom. 2 weeks in which they wouldn't have to hide or be afraid of being exposed. June showered, put on a light summer dress, and did her makeup. The only jewelry she wore was the silver earrings, a birthday present from Silas. A look at the clock told her it was time to go. The taxi was already waiting outside the door. The drive to the airport took almost an hour. The morning rush hour was typical for the city, but even that couldn't dampen June's mood. She felt happier and freer than ever. At the airport, it was loud and crowded. June found the right check-in counter and paused to look around for Silas. He wasn't there yet. She looked at the clock. 10:20. Phew, they still had time. Her phone vibrated again, this time a call. "Hello?" June answered, expecting to hear Silas's voice. "June Logan," a strange woman's voice said. "This is Brenda from Karina Keller's executive office." June tensed up. "Not now. Not a call from work right before vacation." "Yes, I'm listening." "Ms. Keller asked me to inform you that errors have been discovered in the annual report. She wants you to check all the figures one more time before you go on vacation." "But my flight leaves in 3 hours," June said, confused. "I'm already at the airport." "Ms. Keller said it's very urgent. She's counting on you." June felt everything inside her tighten. This was typical of Karina, putting work above all else and demanding the same from her subordinates. "Please tell Ms. Keller that I can't come back. My trip is paid for and I've already checked in." That was a lie. June hadn't checked in yet, but she couldn't let work derail her plans. "Fine, I'll let her know," the secretary replied dryly and hung up. June took a deep breath and tried to calm down. Nothing was going to ruin her vacation. Neither work nor Karina. She deserved this. The phone rang again. This time it was Silas. "Hello." She tried to sound cheerful and carefree. "June, we have a problem." Silas's voice sounded tense. Karina unexpectedly canceled her trip to Singapore. She says she found discrepancies in reports and wants to take care of them personally. June felt the floor drop out from under her. "What do you mean?" "She canceled? Is she at the office?" "Yes, she's there right now." "June, I think she's suspicious. She asked strange questions about my plans for these 2 weeks. I told her I was going fishing with friends, but she looked at me like she didn't believe me. June closed her eyes. Everything was collapsing. Her perfect plan, her long-awaited vacation. What should we do? I don't know. Despair resonated in Silas's voice. Maybe we should postpone the trip. June felt a pang of disappointment. We've waited so long for this, Silas. Are we really going to give up at the last minute? June, if Karina finds out about us, I just can't take any risks right now. A divorce from her would ruin me financially. June fell silent. She knew Karina was a very wealthy woman. The majority of their joint assets were in her name. Silas had often said he wanted to leave his wife, but was afraid of ending up with nothing. Fine, June said finally. But what should I do? I'm already here at the airport. Wait for me, Silas replied. I'll come by and we'll discuss everything. When? In an hour and a half at most. I have to meet with Karina now so I don't arouse suspicion. All right, I'll wait. June sighed and hung up. She stood alone in the middle of the noisy airport with a suitcase and broken hopes. June moved aside, found an empty seat by the window and sat down, watching the planes take off. Each one carried someone's dreams and plans away. Her flight was supposed to leave in 3 hours. But now she wasn't sure if she would be on board. Half an hour passed, but Silas didn't call back. June checked her phone several times, afraid she might have missed a call or a message. Nothing. She was getting nervous. What if Karina really had suspected something? What if their secret was out? June was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice a young woman stopping next to her. She wore a bright floral skirt and an embroidered blouse. Her dark, curly hair was tied up in a high bun, and around her neck hung many gold chains with coins. Such a beautiful young woman, all alone and sad, the stranger asked with a slight accent. June looked up. In front of her stood a young fortune teller. You often encountered such women at the airport, offering to predict the future or simply asking for money. I'm waiting for a friend, June answered dryly, hoping the woman would leave. A friend. The fortune teller smiled, showing her even white teeth. Or a lover. June flinched. How could this woman know that? Excuse me, but I don't want to... The fortune teller interrupted her. I understand. You have a secret. A big secret. She sat down next to June without asking for permission. Listen to me, beauty. I see misfortune in your eyes. June wanted to stand up and leave, but something in the fortune teller's words forced her to stay. What misfortune? The fortune teller took her hand. Her fingers were warm and dry. You are flying with another's husband, she said softly. You think you love him, but he is leading you into a trap. June pulled her hand away abruptly. Who are you? Who sent you? The fortune teller shook her head. No one, beauty. I simply see what others don't notice. And I see danger. What danger? Despite her skepticism, a cold shiver ran down June's spine. Return the ticket, the fortune teller said firmly. Go back to work and look in your office. You will find answers there. June felt a lump rise in her throat. Who are you? How do you know about my work? The fortune teller smiled mysteriously. I know many things, beauty, but that's not important right now. What's important is that you must return, or it will be too late. She stood up, and without another word, disappeared into the crowd. June remained seated, overwhelmed by this strange encounter. How could the fortune teller know about her and Silas, and what danger awaited her? The phone vibrated. A message from Silas. I can't come. Karina won't let me go. I really think she's suspicious. Let's postpone the trip. Sorry, darling. June read the message several times, unable to believe her eyes. Everything had collapsed. The whole plan, all her hopes. And then she remembered the fortune teller's words. Return the ticket, go back to work, and look in your office. Could it be that there was really something at the office she needed to know? What if Karina wasn't just suspicious, but knew about her and Silas? June took a deep breath and made a decision. She stood up, grabbed her suitcase, and walked toward the airport exit. She could cancel the ticket later through the app. The most important thing now was to find out what was going on. June hailed a taxi and gave the address of the business center where North Star Inc. was located. The entire ride, she couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. The fortune teller's words echoed in her head like a warning, like a prophecy. When the taxi stopped in front of the familiar building, June hesitated for a moment. Maybe this was all nonsense. Maybe she shouldn't believe a random fortune teller at the airport, but her intuition told her she was doing the right thing. The security guard at the entrance raised his eyebrows in surprise when he saw June with her suitcase. "Ms. Logan, aren't you on vacation?" "I forgot a few documents," she lied. "Just need to grab them quickly." "Ah, I see," the security guard nodded. "Please, go on through." June took the elevator to the 13th floor, where her office was located. It was quiet in the office. Friday. Many people left early. She hoped not to run into Karina. It would be too complicated to explain her sudden appearance with a suitcase. The door to her office was closed. June took out her key, unlocked the door, and froze on the threshold. At first glance, everything looked as usual. The desk by the window, the computer, a stack of papers she hadn't sorted before her vacation. But something was wrong. She could feel it. June cautiously entered the office, closed the door behind her, and looked around more closely. And then she noticed it, on the ceiling in the corner, almost invisible between the ventilation elements, a camera. Small, black, aimed directly at her workspace. June's heart began to beat faster. Why was a camera installed in her office, and when had it happened? She went to her desk and turned on the computer. While the system was booting up, June continued to look around the office. Under the desk, she discovered a small device attached with tape. It was a bug, a listening device. "My God," June murmured, feeling a shiver run through her body. Someone had been monitoring her, recording every word, every movement. The computer finished booting and requested the password. June typed it in with trembling fingers, but the system reported an error. Incorrect password. She tried again, carefully checking every letter. The same result. Someone changed my password, June realized. She felt panic rising. What was happening here? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a door opening. On the threshold stood Karina Keller, tall, slim, with perfect hair and flawless makeup, in a severe designer suit. She looked as she always did, impeccable, but in her eyes June saw something new, something cold and dangerous. "June," Karina's voice sounded surprised, but June noticed the falseness in that surprise. What a surprise. "I thought you'd be on a plane by now." June felt the blood rush to her cheeks. She didn't know what to say. I had to come back. There were problems with the documents." "Oh, I see." Karina stepped into the office and closed the door behind her. "And I thought it was because of my husband." June froze. Karina knew. She had known all along. "I don't understand what you're talking about." June tried to maintain her composure. Karina laughed, but there wasn't a spark of joy in her laugh. "Stop it, June, I know everything. About your affair with Silas. About your planned trip to Mexico. About all your meetings and conversations." She pointed to the camera in the corner. "Did you think I'm so stupid that I wouldn't notice my own husband having an affair with my subordinate? I've been monitoring you for months, every step, every word." June felt the floor drop out from under her. The whole time, they had been completely exposed. Everything Silas and she thought was their secret, Karina knew. Why, was all June could manage. "Why did you let this happen? Why didn't you fire me immediately? Why didn't you make a scene with Silas?" A strange smile appeared on Karina's face. "Because I wanted you to continue. I wanted you to feel safe, to believe in your cleverness." And then she took a dramatic pause. "And then I wanted to destroy you both." June was paralyzed. She opened her mouth to say something but couldn't get a word out. "Do you know what the most interesting part is?" Karina continued, pacing the office. "You're not the first. Silas has had affairs with my employees before, but you were the most persistent." June felt everything inside her clench. Silas had never spoken about other women. He had assured her he had never been unfaithful to her. Their love was something special. "I don't believe that," she whispered. "Of course you don't," Karina sneered. "None of them believe it until they face the truth. Do you think you're something special to him? The only one he would leave me for and start a new life with?" June remained silent. That's exactly what she had believed. That's exactly what she had hoped for. "Poor naive girl," Karina shook her head. "Silas will never leave me. Do you know why? Because he's a coward, and because he's a nobody without me." She walked to June's desk and sat on the edge. "I created him. When we met, he was a nobody, a simple sales manager with a meager salary. I gave him the contacts, the money, the status, and he knows that perfectly well. June felt nausea rising. Was everything Silas had told her a lie? Were all his promises, all the plans for the future, just a way to get her into bed? If you knew everything, June said slowly, why didn't you just fire me? Why install these cameras and bugs in my office? Karina smiled, and that smile sent a shiver down June's spine. Because it's not just about your affair with my husband. There's something more important. She stood up and went to the window, looking down at the city. North Star Inc. isn't just a company, June, it's my life. I built it from the ground up, made it one of the market leaders, and I won't let anyone jeopardize what I've created, even if that someone is my own husband. June frowned, not understanding where Karina was going with this. I haven't threatened your company. I just fell in love with your husband. Perhaps, Karina interrupted her, but you also gained access to financial documents that you shouldn't have seen. June remembered how Silas had asked her to review certain reports a few months ago. He had said Karina was too busy and had tasked him with it, but he didn't understand finances. June hadn't thought much of it at the time. After all, he was the CEO's husband and had the right to request such documents. Those reports? She asked. But there was nothing special in them, just the usual financial summaries. Not quite. Karina turned to face her. Didn't you notice any discrepancies? Numbers that didn't add up? June tried to remember. The reports were extensive, dozens of pages with charts and graphs. She had only skimmed them without going into detail. No, I think everything was fine. Lucky for me. Karina nodded. Otherwise, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. She walked right up to June. Listen to me very carefully. You will pack your things now and disappear forever. I won't sue you for theft of corporate information. I won't ruin your reputation by telling everyone how you slept with your boss's husband. I will simply let you disappear from my life. June felt a wave of anger rise within her. All these threats, all this intimidation. She hadn't deserved this treatment. And what if I don't leave? She asked quietly. What if I decide to stay and fight? Karina laughed, but her eyes remained cold. Fight against whom? Against me? You don't stand a chance, June. I will crush you like an insect. She took her phone out of her pocket and showed June the screen. It was a video. It showed June and Silas kissing in her office. I have hundreds of recordings like this, Karina said. Every one of your meetings, every conversation. I can destroy you both if I want to. June stared at the screen, unable to look away. They really had been completely exposed the entire time. What about Silas? She asked. Will you banish him from your life too? Silas? Karina put the phone away. No, I'll deal with him differently. He's staying with me because without me, he is nothing. She walked to the door but paused on the threshold. You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave the office. After that, security will be instructed not to let you back in the building. And yes, don't try to contact Silas. He won't be taking your calls anymore. June sank into her chair, feeling tears well up in her eyes. Everything had collapsed. Her career, her relationship, her hopes for the future. Everything had turned to dust. She took her phone and dialed Silas's number. It rang, but he didn't pick up. After the 5th ring, it went to voicemail. June didn't leave a message. What could she have said? That Karina knew everything? That their plans were destroyed? That everything between them was perhaps just another one of his diversions? Her gaze fell on the computer. The password was changed, but maybe she could get into the system another way. June had worked in the IT department before becoming a financial analyst, and remembered some of her old skills. She took a USB drive from her handbag, which she always kept with her just in case. After plugging it into the USB port, June started a recovery program. After a few minutes, she had access to her computer, bypassing the standard authentication system. At least this works, June thought, looking at her desktop. She opened her email program but found that most of the messages had been deleted. It looked as if Karina, or someone on her behalf, had already purged her account. June checked the network drives, the same financial reports she had been working on for the past few months. Everything looked normal, but Karina's words wouldn't leave her alone. Didn't you notice any discrepancies? Numbers that didn't add up? What had she been talking about? June opened the folder with the reports Silas had shown her. She began to meticulously check every number, every formula in the spreadsheets, and then she saw it. Insignificant discrepancies in the totals, deductions that weren't properly documented, Funds transferred to the accounts of companies that were not on the official vendor list. "My God," June whispered. "This is financial manipulation." "This is financial manipulation," a voice echoed from behind her. June spun around. Silas was standing in the doorway. He looked exhausted. His tie was loosened, and desperation was written on his face. "Silas, what's going on?" June stood up, unsure whether to be happy or scared about his appearance. He entered the office and closed the door behind him. "Karina is laundering money through the company," he said quietly, walking toward June. "She's been doing it for several years. I found out by chance 6 months ago." June felt the blood pounding in her temples. "And you didn't report it to the police? You didn't contact the IRS?" Silas smiled bitterly. "With what proof? Everything is arranged so that the trail leads to me. I'm listed as the director of several shell companies. My signature is on most of the documents. Karina set it all up perfectly. If this blows up, I'm the one who will have to answer for it." June looked at Silas, unable to believe what she was hearing. Everything was much more complicated and frightening than she had originally assumed. "Is that why you asked me to review those reports?" she asked. "You wanted me to uncover the scheme?" Silas nodded. "I was hoping your fresh eyes would notice something I had overlooked. Any evidence that would point to Karina and not to me?" "I wasn't looking," June confessed quietly. "I only checked the general numbers without going into detail." Silas sighed heavily and dropped into the chair opposite her. "How long has she known about us?" June asked, glancing at the camera in the corner. "From the beginning," Silas answered. "She arranged it. She wanted me to start an affair with you." June felt nausea rising. "What do you mean? This was all her plan?" Silas nodded. "Karina knew you used to work in IT, that you had skills that could be useful. She specifically appointed you as a financial analyst, gave you access to the reports, and then instructed me to get close to you." June looked at him, unable to believe her ears. "You used me. The whole time you were just following her instructions." "No." Silas leaned forward. "Yes, originally it was her plan, but then I really fell in love with you, June. I swear, everything that was between us was real." June shook her head, feeling tears well up in her eyes. "How am I supposed to believe you now? After everything I've learned?" Silas reached out his hand to touch her, but June flinched back. "I understand how you feel," he said quietly. "But right now, we need to think about how to get out of this situation. Karina is dangerous. She won't stop until she has destroyed us both." "Why did she even start this?" June asked. "Why does she have to launder money through the company?" "Karina works for people you don't want to meet," Silas replied. "Northstar Inc. is the ideal platform to legalize illegally acquired funds. High revenues, many international contracts, a complex financial structure, the perfect cover." June remembered how quickly the company had grown in recent years, how Karina was always finding new clients and partners, how some deals were closed incredibly fast and on astonishingly favorable terms. "And what do we do now?" she asked. "We can't just leave. She won't let us." "I have a plan," Silas answered, "but I need your help." He leaned in and spoke almost in a whisper. "In the last few months, I've collected evidence, copies of documents, audio recordings, data on bank transfers, everything that could link the scheme directly to Karina and not to me. But that's not enough. I need someone with your skills to get access to her personal computer." "Her computer?" June flinched. "That's impossible." "It's better protected than the Pentagon." "Not quite," Silas smiled. "I have her passwords. I watched her enter them once. But there's two-factor authentication, and I need someone who can bypass that." June thought. Technically, it was possible. She could create a script that would intercept the authentication signal and give them temporary access, but the risk was enormous. "And how do we even get into her office?" June asked. "She always locks it when she leaves." "I have a spare key," Silas answered. "Karina doesn't know about it. I had it made a long time ago, just in case." He looked at the clock. "Karina is at an investor meeting right now. She'll be there for at least 2 hours. This is our chance." June hesitated. This sounded like a crazy plan from a crime movie. Hacking someone else's computer, stealing confidential information. If they were caught, they would go to prison. "And then what?" she asked. assuming we get the evidence. What's next? We hand it over to the district attorney and the IRS, Silas replied. Anonymously, of course. Let them deal with Karina and her patrons. And he took June's hand. We can start a new life together just like we planned. June looked at him, unsure if she should trust his words. After everything she had learned, it was hard to trust Silas, but she had no choice. Karina had practically fired her, and without a job and references, it would be difficult to find a new position. Besides, if they didn't stop the scheme, nobody knew how this would all end. Fine, she said finally. I'll help you. But after that, we go our separate ways. Forever. Pain flickered in Silas's eyes, but he nodded. I understand. You have every right to hate me after everything that's happened, but right now we have to work together. They developed a plan. June would create a program that would bypass the two-factor authentication on Karina's computer. Silas would lead her into the CEO's office and keep watch to make sure no one disturbed them. They would copy all the necessary files and disappear unnoticed. June opened her laptop and started writing the code. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Despite her years as a financial analyst, she hadn't forgotten her programming skills. Done, she said half an hour later, closing the laptop. Now we just have to connect it to her computer and run it. Silas nodded. Then let's go. The faster we start, the better the chance we'll be finished before Karina gets back. They left June's office and walked to the elevator. The office was practically empty. Only a few employees had stayed late on this Friday. Nobody noticed June and Silas walking down the corridor. Karina's office was on the next floor, a huge room with panoramic windows and a view of the city. Silas took out the key and unlocked the door. Quickly, he whispered, letting June go in first. Karina's office looked like the cover of an interior design magazine. Minimalist furniture, contemporary art on the walls, fresh flowers in vases, and not a single unnecessary piece of paper on the impeccably clean desk. June went to the computer and turned it on. While the system was booting up, she looked around, searching for cameras. If Karina had installed surveillance in June's office, there was surely something similar here. Don't worry, Silas said as if he had read her mind. There are no cameras in here. Karina is too paranoid to let anyone watch her. The computer booted up and requested the password. Silas leaned in and typed in the combination of symbols. The system accepted the password but immediately requested the code from the two-factor authentication app. You're up, Silas said, stepping back. June took out her USB drive, plugged it into the computer, and ran her program. The screen flickered briefly, and then the system bypassed the two-factor authentication and loaded the desktop. You're a genius, Silas smiled. I just know how these security mechanisms work, June replied, without taking her eyes off the screen. We don't have much time. What exactly are we looking for? June asked. Documents about offshore companies, anything related to international transfers, and Karina's private correspondence with the people on the list I'm about to give you. He took a folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to June. It was a list of names and companies, most of which she had never heard of. June began her search. She opened folder after folder, searched through files, and copied everything that seemed important onto the external hard drive Silas had given her. Look, she said, opening a document. This is an agreement with a company in the Cayman Islands. They are supposedly providing consulting services, but the sums are gigantic. Silas moved closer and looked over her shoulder. Exactly what we need. That's one of the main methods of laundering. The money flows abroad as payment for services, and then returns as clean income through other companies. June continued copying files. The more she found, the clearer the picture became. North Star Inc. was indeed being used as a front for massive financial schemes. Millions of dollars flowed through the company, landed in offshore accounts, and returned through a complex system of transactions. This is insane, June whispered. How could she organize all this? Karina didn't invent this alone, Silas answered. There are very influential people behind her. Politicians, business leaders, possibly even representatives of organized crime. She's just an operative, even if she gets her cut. June suddenly noticed a folder with the unusual name, Project Phoenix. She opened it and found documents that looked even more suspicious. What is this? She asked, showing Silas the screen. He leaned in, looked at the files, and his face changed. "My God!" he whispered. "This is even worse than I thought. She's planning to liquidate the company, pull all the assets, drive North Star Inc. into bankruptcy, and disappear." "When?" June asked, feeling a chill. Silas opened one of the documents. "According to the timeline, in 2 weeks. Everything is already prepared. The money will be withdrawn through shell companies, the documents forged, and the blame for the bankruptcy is supposed to be—" He paused. "Pinned on me." June couldn't believe it. That's why she reacted so calmly to our affair. That's why she didn't make a scene. She was using it as further leverage against him. Silas nodded. "Probably. Imagine. The CEO's husband, who is having an affair with an employee, is suddenly implicated in financial schemes and the company's bankruptcy. The perfect scapegoat." He looked at June. "You're on this list, too. They plan to frame us both. Your signature is on several key documents related to the financial reports." June remembered all the papers she had signed in recent months. She had never read them very closely, trusting Karina and the legal department. "We have to copy all of this," she said, determined. "We have to find her correspondence. If she discussed these plans with someone, that would be direct proof." They kept searching. Silas found a folder with Karina's private correspondence and began looking through the emails, while June examined the financial documents. "Here," Silas said suddenly, "correspondence with a Sergei Wolf. He mentions Project Phoenix and discusses the details of the asset withdrawal. And right here, it says how they plan to pin everything on me and you." June looked at the screen. The emails were a real find. In them, Karina openly discussed the plan for the company's bankruptcy and the withdrawal of funds. Specific sums, accounts, and dates were mentioned. "This is what we need," June said. "With this evidence, we can go to the police." Silas shook his head. "Not so fast. We don't know how influential the people Karina is connected to are. If one of them is inside law enforcement, our statement could just disappear, and we'd be in even greater danger." "What do we do then?" June asked. "I have a friend who's a journalist," Silas answered. "He investigates corruption schemes. If we give him copies of all the documents, he can turn it into a story that will be impossible to ignore." June nodded. That sounded reasonable. A public expose was safer than a quiet report to the police. "Then let's copy everything and get out of here," she said, plugging the external hard drive into the computer. They began copying all the documents they had found. The process took several minutes, but every second felt like an eternity. June kept looking at the door, afraid it might open at any moment, and Karina would appear on the threshold. "Done," she said at last, pulling out the hard drive. "Now we have to make sure we haven't left any traces." She closed all the open files and folders, reset the computer desktop to its original state, and shut down the system. "Let's go," Silas said and took her hand. They left Karina's office, and Silas locked the door. The corridor was still empty. They took the elevator to the floor where June's office was located. "What now?" she asked when they were back in her office. "Now we have to contact the journalist," Silas answered. "As soon as possible, but not from here." "It's not safe here," June nodded. She saw the camera in the corner of the office. Who knew if Karina wasn't watching them right now? "I'll grab my things and we'll go," she said. "Are you here by car?" "Yes, it's in the parking garage." "Good. Give me 5 minutes." June quickly packed her personal belongings into her bag. Photos that were on the desk, her favorite mug, a few books. Everything else, the computer, the documents, the office supplies, belonged to the company. "I'm ready," she said, throwing the bag over her shoulder and grabbing the handle of the suitcase she had come with from the airport. They left the office and June locked the door. It was the last time. She knew she would never return to this office. Regardless of how this whole story ended, her career at North Star Inc. was over. They went to the parking garage and headed for Silas's car, a silver BMW. He opened the trunk to put June's suitcase inside and suddenly froze. "What's wrong?" June asked, noticing how his face changed. Silas slowly raised his gaze. "We have to get out of here immediately." "Why? What happened?" "The trunk is empty," he said quietly. "My travel bag should be in there. I was supposed to drive to the airport with you, remember? I had a bag with my things for the trip with me." A cold shiver ran down June's spine. "Do you think Karina was here?" Silas nodded. She knows I'm in the building. Maybe she even knows we were in her office. At that moment, they heard the sound of an elevator door opening. When they turned around, they saw Karina stepping into the garage, accompanied by two large men in dark suits. "Run!" Silas shouted, grabbing June's arm. They rushed toward the garage exit, leaving the suitcase by the car. June heard Karina's shouts and the heavy footsteps of their pursuers behind them. Her heart was hammering like crazy. The blood was pounding in her temples. "This way." Silas pulled her toward the emergency stairs. They burst into the stairwell and began running quickly upward. Voices echoed from below. Karina and her companions were also in the stairwell. "Why are we running up?" June asked, gasping. "We have to get to the street. We'll be caught immediately there," Silas answered. "The security at the entrance, the surveillance cameras. Karina has probably already warned them." They ran higher and higher, bounding up the steps. June felt her lungs burning. Her high-heeled shoes were not made for this kind of marathon. "Where are we going?" she asked as they passed the 15th floor. "To the roof," Silas answered. "From there, we can cross to the neighboring building. They have different guards, different cameras. We have a chance to escape unnoticed." They reached the top floor, and Silas pushed the door to the roof open. The evening air hit their faces. The sun was already setting, painting the city's skyscrapers in golden tones. "Over there!" Silas pointed to the edge of the roof, where a narrow bridge connected their building to the neighboring business center. They ran to the bridge, but suddenly the door to the roof opened again, and their pursuers appeared on the threshold. Karina stayed at the entrance while the two men ran after them. "Faster!" Silas shouted, urging June toward the bridge. She stepped onto the narrow metal structure and froze. Below her yawned the 15-story abyss. One wrong step and she would fall to her death. "I can't," June whispered, pulling back. "I'm afraid of heights. June, please." There was desperation in Silas's voice. "We have no choice. They're catching up." He was right. The men were only 20 yards away from them and closing the gap quickly. June took a deep breath and stepped onto the bridge again. One step, another step. The bridge swayed slightly under their weight. She didn't look down, only forward, at the opposite roof, which now seemed to be their only salvation. Silas followed her, constantly looking back. The pursuers had reached the bridge but stopped. It looked as if they too had no desire to risk their lives on the rickety structure. "Almost there," Silas cheered June on. "Just a little further." They covered the last few feet and jumped onto the solid surface of the neighboring roof. June felt her knees buckle from the terror she had experienced, but Silas supported her. "You're amazing," he said. "Now we have to get downstairs quickly and get out of here." They found the door to the stairwell and descended. Unlike their office building, this business center was almost empty. The workday was long over. They reached the ground floor without obstruction and left the building through the emergency exit onto a side street. "What now?" June asked, once they had gained a safe distance from the building. She still couldn't believe what had happened. Just that morning, she had been preparing for her dream vacation, and now she was fleeing from pursuers, carrying evidence of financial crimes with her. "We need to find a safe place," Silas answered. "Karina won't give up. She has too much to lose." He looked around and waved down a passing taxi. The car stopped, and they quickly got in. "Where to?" the driver asked. Silas gave an address on the outskirts of the city. "It's a friend's apartment," he explained to June. "He's out of the country right now. We can lay low there for a few days. No one will find us there." June nodded silently. She felt exhausted. Too much information. Too many shocks for one day. "What we found out," she said quietly, "that's not just financial manipulation, is it? This is much more serious." Silas looked out the window at the passing city. "Yeah," he finally answered. "North Star Inc. is being used to launder money from illegal businesses. Maybe even worse. Karina is just one part of the chain, but an important part." "And you knew that the whole time?" June's voice sounded accusatory. "Not everything," Silas shook his head. "I started to suspect something about a year ago when I noticed oddities in the company's financial reports, but I only got concrete proof 6 months ago." "Right then," June finished for him. "Right when our affair began. Karina instructed you to get close to me so I would help find evidence, didn't she?" Silas nodded without looking at her. "At first, yes, that was her plan. But then everything changed. I really fell in love with you, June, and decided to use the situation to find a way out of all this, to free myself from Karina and her patrons. June looked at his profile, unsure if she should believe him. Her heart said one thing, her mind another. "Why didn't you go to the police right away when you had the first pieces of evidence?" she asked. "I tried," Silas smiled bitterly. "I anonymously contacted a detective I thought was honest. A week later, he died in a car accident. An accident, according to the papers. But I understood that I was dealing with very dangerous people, and that a direct approach wasn't an option." The taxi stopped in front of an ordinary apartment building on the outskirts of the city. Silas paid the driver and they got out. "The apartment is on the 7th floor," he said as they entered the stairwell. "The elevator is broken. We have to walk." They climbed the stairs and stopped in front of an ordinary metal door. Silas took a key ring from his pocket, selected a key, and opened the lock. The apartment was small but cozy. Simple furniture, minimal decoration, but clean and tidy. "Make yourself comfortable," Silas said, locking the door. "There should be some food in the fridge. Max, my friend, asked me to look after the apartment while he's away." June went into the living room and collapsed onto the sofa. Only now did she realize how tired she was, physically and emotionally. "We need to contact your journalist friend," she said. "The sooner we hand over the documents, the better." Silas nodded. "I'll call him right now." He took out his cell phone but suddenly paused. "No, not with this number. Karina is surely monitoring all calls by now." Silas took the back off the phone, removed the SIM card, and broke it in half. Max should have a spare phone. He always kept one for emergencies. He went into the bedroom and started searching in the drawers. June stayed in the living room, trying to process everything that had happened. Her life had been turned upside down in a single day. That morning, she was a successful financial analyst preparing for a vacation with her lover. Now she was a fugitive, holding evidence of serious crimes, being pursued by influential and dangerous people who would stop at nothing to keep that evidence from going public. Found it. Silas came back into the living room with a simple feature phone. An old model, but it works, and no one will be able to trace the call on it. He dialed a number and went to the window, speaking quietly, but June still heard the conversation. "Ferdinand, is that you? This is Silas. Yeah, I know it's late. Listen, I have information. Very serious. No, not over the phone. Tomorrow." "Good. Let's meet tomorrow at 10 a.m. The cafe on Monroe. Got it?" "Yes. I won't be alone. Thanks. See you tomorrow." He ended the call and turned to June. "We're meeting tomorrow morning. Ferdinand Kraus, an investigative journalist, works for an independent paper. We'll give him all the documents, and he'll turn it into a story." "And then?" June asked. "What happens to us?" Silas sat down next to her on the sofa. "And then we disappear. I have some savings that Karina doesn't control. We can leave the country, start a new life, somewhere they can't find us." "We?" June looked at him. "Do you still think we're going to be together after everything that's happened?" Pain flickered in Silas's eyes. "I understand your feelings, June. I lied to you. I used you. But my feelings for you are real. I really do love you." June shook her head, feeling tears well up in her eyes. "I don't know who or what to believe anymore. Everything I thought was true has turned out to be a lie. My work, our relationship, even my damn vacation. It was all part of a big game in which I was just a pawn." Silas wanted to say something, but June raised her hand to stop him. "Let's first sort out what's going on here. Hand over the evidence, ensure our safety, and then decide what to do next, separately or together." He nodded, accepting her decision. "You're right. The most important thing now is to survive and bring the truth to light. The rest can wait." June stood up from the sofa. "I want to take a shower and rest a little. Today has been too long a day." "Of course." Silas pointed to the door on the right. "The bathroom is there. I'll see what I can fix for dinner." June went into the bathroom, locked the door, and leaned her back against it. Only now, when she was alone, did she allow the tears to run down her cheeks. Everything had collapsed. Her career, her relationship, her plans for the future, everything was in ruins. But somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope glowed. Maybe something new, something better, would emerge from this chaos. Maybe through all these trials, she would find her true path. June washed her face with warm water, wiping away the tears and makeup. The mirror reflected a tired face with reddened eyes, but in those eyes, there was no longer despair, but determination. "I can handle this," she said to her reflection. "No matter what happens next, I can handle this." The next morning began for June with the smell of freshly brewed coffee. She opened her eyes and didn't immediately recognize where she was. A strange room, a strange bed. Then the memory returned. The escape, the chase, Silas's friend's apartment. June sat up in bed and rubbed her eyes. She felt shattered, even though she had slept for almost 10 hours. Too many emotions, too much stress. She got up and left the bedroom. Silas was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Good morning," he said when he saw June. "How did you sleep?" "Not bad, considering the circumstances," she answered, sitting down at the table. "What time is it?" 8:30 a.m. "Good. We still have time before the meeting with Ferdinand." Silas placed a cup of coffee and a plate with an omelet in front of her. "Eat, you need strength." June nodded and began to eat. Only now did she realize how hungry she was. Yesterday, she had refused dinner, saying she just wanted to sleep. "Do we have a plan?" she asked, sipping her coffee. "What are we going to do after the meeting with the journalist?" Silas sat down across from her, a cup in his hand. "I thought about it all night. We have to disappear for a while. I have contacts abroad who can help us. But first, we have to get out of the city unnoticed. Airports and train stations will certainly be monitored," June noted. "Karina knows our passport details and can track bookings." Silas nodded. "Exactly, that's why we'll drive. Max has an old Ford in the garage. No one will be looking for us in that car," June thought. The plan sounded risky, but they apparently had no other options. "And the documents?" she asked. "The external hard drive with the files." "Got it all." Silas tapped the breast pocket of his shirt. "I won't be separated from it for a minute." They finished breakfast and got ready. June put on clothes she had found in the closet, which presumably belonged to Max's girlfriend. The jeans were a bit too big, and the t-shirt a bit too colorful, but she had no choice. Her own clothes, an elegant dress for the vacation, were not the best choice for a fugitive. At 9:30 a.m. they left the apartment. Silas was tense, constantly looking around. They went to the parking garage, where the old silver Ford was parked. "This is our transportation," Silas said, opening the door with the key. "No Ferrari, but it serves its purpose." They got into the car and drove out of the garage. To get to the cafe where the meeting with the journalist was arranged, they had to drive through the whole city. "Do you think Karina has already filed a report with the police?" June asked, looking out the window at the passing buildings. "Hardly," Silas replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "That's too dangerous for her. The police would start asking questions, digging for information. She's probably using her connections to find us through unofficial channels." June shuddered at the thought of what unofficial channels Karina might use. The people behind her obviously wouldn't shrink from any method. They reached the cafe 10 minutes before the agreed-upon time. It was a small establishment in an old part of the city, far from the business centers and tourist routes. The ideal place for a meeting that needed to stay secret. "Wait here," Silas said, stopping the car in an alley behind the cafe. "I'm going to check if Ferdinand is there." He got out of the car and walked to the cafe entrance. June stayed seated, nervously drumming her fingers on her knee. Dozens of thoughts raced through her head. What if the meeting with the journalist is a trap? What if Ferdinand works for the same people as Karina? Her thoughts were interrupted by Silas, who returned after 5 minutes. "Ferdinand is inside," he said. "It's all clear, no suspicious people. Come on, let's go." They entered the cafe. At this time of day, there were only a few customers. An elderly couple at a table in the corner, a young woman with a laptop by the window, and a middle-aged man at a table in the back. He raised his hand to greet Silas. "That's Ferdinand," Silas whispered to June, and they walked to the table. Ferdinand Kraus turned out to be a sturdy man in his 40s, with attentive gray eyes and early gray in his dark hair. He stood up as they approached and shook Silas's hand first, then June's. "Nice to meet you," he said, shaking June's hand. They sat down at the table. Ferdinand seemed calm, but there was a tension in his eyes. "So," he said, lowering his voice. Silas mentioned you have serious information. Silas nodded and pulled the external hard drive from his pocket. This is the proof of the financial schemes at North Star Inc. money laundering, forgery of documents, impending bankruptcy with asset stripping. Ferdinand whistled softly. Serious accusations. Do you have concrete documents that confirm this? Everything is on here, Silas replied. Financial reports, management correspondence, details on the methods of asset withdrawal, everything needed for an investigation. Ferdinand took the hard drive and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. I'll check the material and get back to you. If it all checks out, we'll publish the story in the next few days. We don't have several days, June interjected. We're being hunted, and as soon as Karina realizes we have evidence, she'll do anything to stop us. Ferdinand looked at her attentively. I understand your urgency, but investigative journalism takes time. I have to verify all the facts, find confirmation from independent sources. Otherwise, the material won't have any impact. How much time do you need? Silas asked. At least 2 to 3 days, if the information is as compelling as you say. Silas and June looked at each other. 3 days was a long time, too long given their situation. Fine, Silas said finally. 3 days, but no longer. And we need a place where we can wait this out safely. Ferdinand thought. I have a small cabin outside the city. It's quiet there, few neighbors. No one will look for you in that remote place. Sounds good, Silas nodded. How do we get there? Ferdinand took out a notepad, wrote down the address, and drew a rough map with directions. It's about a 2-hour drive from the city. The road isn't the best, but you'll get there fine by car. The keys are under a stone by the front entrance, the second one from the right on the steps. He tore off the sheet and handed it to Silas. Be careful. Silas put the note in his pocket. Thanks, Ferdinand. We'll wait for your call. They stood up from the table. Ferdinand shook their hands goodbye. Good luck, he said. And don't worry, the truth always finds a way. They left the cafe and hurried back to the car. June felt a little calmer after the meeting with the journalist. At least now they had a plan, and a place where they could hide. Silas started the car, and they drove onto the road leading out of the city. Do you think we can trust him? June asked as they got on the highway. Silas looked intently at the road. We don't have a choice, but Ferdinand is an honest man. His investigations have already led to the resignation of officials and the launch of criminal proceedings multiple times. If anyone can help us, it's him. June nodded and leaned back. Ahead of them lay a 2-hour drive on an unknown road, and 3 days of waiting in a secluded cabin in the middle of the woods. Not a rosy prospect, but still better than falling into Karina's hands or the hands of her patrons. By the way, June said suddenly, I've been meaning to ask. The fortune teller at the airport, how could she know about you and me, and that I should go back to the office? Silas frowned. What fortune teller? June told him about the strange encounter at the airport, how the young fortune teller had approached her, taken her hand, warned her of the danger, and advised her to return to the office and check. If it hadn't been for her, I would have gotten on the plane and flown off, June finished. And I never would have found out about the cameras and bugs in my office. Silas looked confused. I don't know who that was or how she could have known that. Maybe a coincidence or... He paused. Or did someone want you to find out the truth? Someone who knew about Karina's plans but couldn't warn you directly? June thought. Who could that have been? Someone from the office? Someone who knew about the scheme but was afraid to openly oppose Karina? In any case, Silas continued, it worked. You came back, discovered the cameras, and we have proof of Karina's crimes. Maybe it was fate. June didn't believe in fate, but she couldn't deny that the chain of events that had led her to this point was too unpredictable to be just a coincidence. They continued the drive in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, forests and fields passed by. The road became narrower and windier. After 2 hours, as Ferdinand had promised, they reached a small green village. I think we need to turn here, Silas said, comparing the route with the drawn sketch. They turned onto an unpaved road, drove for a few more miles, and stopped in front of a wooden house surrounded by a high fence. We're here, Silas announced, turning off the engine. Our shelter for the next 3 days. The 3 days at Ferdinand's cabin dragged on agonizingly slowly. Without internet, without contact with the outside world, without news of what was happening in the city, time seemed to stand still. June spent her days reading books she found on the shelves or helping Silas with chores. They settled in, cooked on the old stove, fetched water from the well, sat by the fireplace in the evenings, and stared into the fire. They barely spoke about the past. The topic was too painful. Instead, they discussed future plans, although both knew how uncertain that future was. "If everything goes well," Silas said, "if Ferdinand's investigation leads to the arrest of Karina and her patrons, we can come back. Testify in court, help the investigation. And then?" June asked. "What comes then?" Silas shrugged. "I don't know. Everything will change. North Star Inc. will probably be shut down or reorganized. We'll have to find new jobs, maybe in another city." June thought about her career. 5 years at North Star Inc., a gradual climb from a simple analyst to a department head. And all of it had been crossed out in a single day, by a single decision to run off with the boss's husband. But did she regret it? Was it worth it? June didn't know. She couldn't evaluate the consequences of her actions as long as it wasn't over, as long as they weren't safe. On the 3rd day of their seclusion, June woke to the sound of an approaching car. She looked out the window and saw a battered SUV stopping in front of the gate. Ferdinand Kraus got out. "Silas," she called. "Ferdinand is here." Silas ran out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. They went onto the porch together to greet their guest. "Ferdinand, we didn't expect you so soon." Silas shook the journalist's hand. Ferdinand looked tired but satisfied. There were dark circles under his eyes. The stubble on his chin indicated he hadn't slept in several days. "I have good news," he said as he entered the house. "The material is ready. It will be published tomorrow morning simultaneously in our newspaper and on 3 major news portals." June and Silas looked at each other. Their plan was beginning to bear fruit. "What's in it?" June asked. As they walked into the living room, Ferdinand dropped into an armchair and rubbed his face. Everything. The entire money laundering scheme through North Star Inc. names, dates, sums, the proof that Karina Keller was acting on behalf of high-ranking individuals, the details of the impending bankruptcy of the company with asset stripping. He took his laptop from his bag and opened it. "See here," he said, turning the screen toward them. It was the draft of the article. June and Silas leaned over the laptop and read the material. It was a comprehensive, detailed, and convincing investigation. Ferdinand had not only used the documents they provided, but had also found additional confirmation from other sources. "This is impressive," Silas said when they finished reading. "You've done an enormous amount of work in such a short time." Ferdinand smiled faintly. 3 days without sleep, dozens of calls and meetings. But it was worth it. The story is a bombshell. After publication, investigations will be launched, and Karina and her patrons won't be able to talk their way out of it. "And what about us?" June asked. "You will only be mentioned in the article as anonymous sources," Ferdinand replied. "Your names don't appear, but—" He hesitated. "After publication, you will still have to testify before investigators. Your statements will be crucial for the case." Silas nodded. "We're prepared for that. The main thing is that the truth comes out." Ferdinand closed the laptop and looked at them seriously. "There's something else you need to know. Karina has disappeared." "Disappeared?" Silas asked. "What do you mean?" "She left the country 2 days ago. According to my sources, she flew on a private jet toward a country with no extradition treaty. She probably sensed the danger and decided not to take any risks." June and Silas looked at each other again. This changed the situation. If Karina had fled, their immediate danger was over. "And her patrons?" June asked cautiously. "They are still here," Ferdinand answered, "and they know nothing about the upcoming publication. Tomorrow will be an unpleasant surprise for them." He stood up from the armchair. "I came to warn you and to tell you that tomorrow, after the article appears, representatives from the state police will come to you. They will take official statements and offer you protection if needed." "Thanks, Ferdinand." Silas extended his hand to him. "You're risking no less than we are." The journalist shook his hand. "It's my job to bring the truth to light no matter how unpleasant it is." He said goodbye and drove off, leaving June and Silas alone with their thoughts and expectations. "Tomorrow everything will change," June said quietly as she watched Ferdinand's departing car. Nothing will ever be the same. Silas moved closer and gently took her hand. That's good, June. We're doing the right thing. We're stopping a crime, saving the company, and protecting the people who would have suffered under Karina's schemes. June looked at him. In that moment, she almost believed him. She almost believed that everything he was doing was for the sake of justice, and not for some other hidden motives. I know, she said. It just came so suddenly. Just a week ago, I was an ordinary financial analyst preparing for vacation. And now you're a hero, Silas said softly. A person who wasn't afraid to stand up against the system, against corruption and crime. June smiled bitterly. A hero. I just wanted to be happy with you, and instead I got caught up in a story with financial schemes, escape, and investigations. Silas lowered his head. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I shouldn't have dragged you into all this. I shouldn't have used your feelings. But you did, June interrupted him, and now we're here, waiting for the article to come out tomorrow that will change our lives forever. She pulled her hand from his and went to the window. Let's not talk about it right now, she said. We still have one evening before all this happens. Let's just have dinner, sit by the fire like normal people, without talking about crimes, investigations, and the future. Silas nodded, accepting her suggestion. They spent the evening almost like the previous days. They cooked, talked about the books they had read, sat by the fire, and stared into the flames. But the tension was in the air, the expectation of the impending changes. When they went to their separate rooms to sleep, June couldn't fall asleep for a long time. Thoughts raced through her head. Memories of the last few days, worry about the future. What would happen tomorrow? How would her life change after the article's publication? Would she ever be able to return to a normal life? With these thoughts, she finally sank into a restless sleep. The morning began with a loud noise. Someone was hammering on the door of the cabin. June shot up. Her heart was pounding like crazy. Who could it be? The investigators Ferdinand had mentioned, or Karina's people who had found them after all? She looked out the window and saw several police cars in front of the gate. Men in uniform and plainclothes were standing on the porch. Silas, she called. The police are here. Silas ran out of his bedroom, hastily pulling on his shirt. Already? He looked at the clock. It's only 8 a.m. Ferdinand said the article would appear in the morning, but I didn't think the reaction would be so fast. Open up, police. The voice from outside boomed again. Silas went to the door. Who is it? He asked. State police, open the door immediately. Silas looked at June and whispered, The article must be out. Be ready for questioning. He opened the door. On the threshold stood a man in a severe suit, followed by several police officers. Silas Keller? The man asked. Yes, that's me. You are under arrest on suspicion of aggravated fraud and conspiracy to commit bankruptcy fraud, the man said in an official tone, showing his badge. I am Detective Sergeant Karsten Gruber, and I'm leading the investigation into the financial misconduct at North Star Inc. 2 police officers entered the house and took Silas by the arms. Wait, June stepped forward. This must be a mistake. Silas isn't a criminal. He helped expose Karina Keller's schemes. Detective Sergeant Gruber turned to her. June Logan? Yes, that's me. You are also under arrest on the same suspicion. I must ask you to come with us. We have a warrant for your arrest. June froze. An arrest warrant. But why? But we turned over evidence. We worked with the journalist. Which journalist? Gruber asked, raising an eyebrow. Ferdinand. Ferdinand Kraus from the Independent newspaper. He was supposed to publish an article this morning. Gruber shook his head. There is no article, Ms. Logan, and no journalist named Ferdinand Kraus at any publication we know of. June felt the floor drop out from under her. She turned to Silas, searching for support or an explanation, but saw the same dismay and confusion on his face. But he was here yesterday. He showed us the article on his laptop, June cried. We will discuss all the details at the station, Gruber said. Now please get ready. You have 5 minutes. June slowly returned to the bedroom. Her hands were shaking, her thoughts were jumbled. What was happening? Where was the article? Where was Ferdinand? Had they really been betrayed? She quickly got dressed and went into the living room. Silas was already being led outside and put into one of the police cars. His face was pale, his eyes were confused. June, I don't understand what's happening, he shouted when he saw her. I trusted Ferdinand. He promised to help. The police officers put him in the car and slammed the door. Detective Sergeant Gruber approached June. It's time for you, he said. You'll ride in a different car. June nodded, still in disbelief at what was happening. It felt as if she was trapped in a nightmare from which she was about to wake up. She was put into another police car, and the convoy started moving. June looked out the window at the receding cabin, at the forest, at the blue sky. Everything looked so normal, so ordinary, and yet her life had just shattered into pieces. After 2 hours, they reached the city and stopped in front of the state police headquarters. June was led through long corridors and taken to an interrogation room. A small room with a table, 3 chairs, and a surveillance camera in the corner. Please sit down, Gruber said, gesturing to a chair. We will now begin the interrogation. June sat down, feeling completely exhausted. This all seemed unreal, as if she were watching the events from the outside. Where is Silas? She asked. He is being questioned in the next room, Gruber answered. Don't worry, he's fine. He took out a file folder and opened it. June Logan, financial analyst at North Star Incors, he began. You are suspected of participating, along with Silas Keller, in a scheme to embezzle company assets and prepare for deliberate bankruptcy. What do you have to say in your defense? June took a deep breath. That's not true, she said firmly. I was not involved in any schemes. On the contrary, Silas and I uncovered this scheme and tried to expose it. She told the detective everything from the beginning, about her relationship with Silas, how Karina had installed cameras and bugs in her office, how they had found documents on Karina's computer, about the meeting with Ferdinand and his promise to publish the story. Gruber listened attentively, taking notes. When June finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at her thoughtfully. An interesting version, he said, but we have different information. According to our data, you and Silas Keller were preparing the company's bankruptcy. You worked with the documents, had access to the financial reports, and Silas, as the CEO's husband, could obtain any information and sign any paper. That's not true, June exclaimed. It was the other way around. Karina organized the money laundering scheme and prepared the bankruptcy. We have proof. What proof? Gruber asked. Documents we copied from Karina's computer. They're on the external hard drive we gave to Ferdinand. The journalist who doesn't exist, Gruber added. June fell silent, realizing the absurdity of the situation. If Ferdinand wasn't a journalist, who was he? And where was the evidence they had given him now? I don't understand, she said quietly. We trusted him. He promised to help. Gruber sighed. Karina Keller filed a report 3 days ago for the theft of important business documents. She claims you and Silas stole them for the purpose of extortion and manipulation. Given your personal relationship with her husband, the motive seems quite plausible. June felt a wave of anger and despair rise in her chest. That's a lie. Karina staged everything. She knew about our relationship from the beginning, monitored us, recorded us, and then used it as a cover for her own crimes. Where is the proof? Gruber asked calmly. On the hard drive you gave to Ferdinand. The one who doesn't exist, Gruber finished. June lowered her head. The situation seemed hopeless. Without proof, without witnesses, without the article. Just their word against Karina's, and it was clear who would be believed. I want a lawyer, she said finally. Gruber nodded. That is your right. We will provide you with a public defender if you don't have your own. He stood up from the table. The interrogation is over. You will be taken to a pretrial detention cell. The hearing for your remand will be tomorrow. June remained seated, unable to believe this was all happening to her. How could they have been so wrong? How could they trust a stranger without verifying his identity, without being sure of his reliability? A police officer led her to the cell, a small room with an iron bed, a table, and a toilet in the corner. The door slammed shut behind her, and June was alone. She sat on the bed and put her head in her hands. Everything had collapsed. Their plan had failed. Now they were facing charges for serious financial crimes, while the real criminal, Karina, remained unpunished. How could we be so naive? June thought, remembering the meeting with Ferdinand, his confident speeches, his promise to help. Who was he really? Karina's man? An independent con artist who decided to exploit the situation? Or just a lunatic who fancied himself a great investigator? Regardless of the answer, the result was the same. They were trapped and the evidence was gone. June didn't know how long she had been in the cell, lost in dark thoughts. She was snapped out of her stupor by the sound of the door opening. A police officer stood on the threshold. "Logan, you have a visit from your lawyer," he said. June looked up in surprise. She hadn't contacted a lawyer yet. Was it the public defender? She was taken to the attorney-client meeting room, a small room with a table and 2 chairs. At the table sat a middle-aged woman in a severe suit, with glasses on her nose and a file folder in front of her. "Good afternoon, Ms. Logan," the woman said after the officer had left and closed the door. "My name is Elisa Wagner. I am your lawyer." "But I didn't," June began. "I know," Elisa Wagner interrupted her. "I was retained by Oscar Reuter." June froze, unable to believe her ears. "Oscar Reuter? But the detective said he doesn't exist." "Because Oscar Reuter isn't his real name," the lawyer said quietly. "His real name is Oscar Reuter. He is an agent with the white-collar crime division of the FBI, and he has been investigating Karina Keller and her patrons for the last 2 years. June stared at the lawyer, unable to believe what she was hearing. Oscar, an FBI agent? The whole time, he was conducting his own investigation? "I don't understand," she said finally. "If he's from the FBI, why were we arrested? Why didn't he help us?" Elisa Wagner took documents from the folder and laid them on the table. "It's not that simple, Ms. Logan. The Karina Keller case is part of a large-scale investigation into a group of high-ranking officials and business leaders. The operation has been in preparation for over a year, and you and Silas unexpectedly ended up in the middle of it." "So, we ruined everything?" June asked bitterly. "No." The lawyer shook her head. "You actually accelerated events. Oscar had planned to catch Karina in the act of trying to withdraw the assets. But when you found the documents on her computer, she sensed the danger and accelerated her plans. We had to act faster." "But why didn't he tell us the truth? Why did he pose as a journalist?" "First, he was not allowed to disclose his identity. Second, he wasn't sure about you, didn't know how involved you were in the scheme. Only after he examined the documents you gave him did he understand that you were truly victims and not accomplices," June thought, remembering the meeting with Oscar, his questions, his attentive gaze. Now, a lot of things made sense. "But why were we arrested?" she asked again. "And where is Silas? What about him?" "The arrest was necessary for your own safety," Elisa Wagner answered. "After Karina found out about the missing documents, she hired people to find you. Here in custody, you are safe. And Silas is currently giving his statement to the FBI investigators. He is fine. And the hard drive with the evidence, it's with Oscar. The documents are being analyzed by specialists and are already forming the basis of the case against Karina and her patrons." June felt the tension of the last few days ease. Not all was lost. Their plan had worked, albeit differently than expected. "What will happen now?" she asked. "To us? To the case?" Elisa Wagner smiled for the first time during the entire conversation. "You will be fine. The charges will be dropped as soon as Oscar submits all the evidence and his recommendations. And Karina," she paused. "Karina is already arrested." "What?" June leaned forward. "But the detective said she had left the country." "That was part of the operation," the lawyer explained. "Karina did indeed try to flee, but was arrested at the airport in Doha at the request of our special services. They are now deciding on her extradition, and her patrons here in the U.S. are already under surveillance." June leaned back in her chair, processing the information. This all sounded like the plot of a spy movie, not real life. "When will we be released?" she asked. "Tomorrow, after the formal dismissal of the charges," Elisa Wagner answered. "However, you must remain in the city and be available to the investigators. Your testimonies will be crucial in the case." She packed the documents back into the folder. "I have one more question," June said, remembering the strange encounter at the airport. "The fortune teller who came to me and warned me of the danger, who was she?" The fortune teller? Elisa Wagner frowned. I don't know anything about a fortune teller. As far as I know, that was not part of the operation. June nodded. So it really was a coincidence. Or a personal intervention that not even the FBI knew about. Thank you, she said to the lawyer, for the information and the help. You're welcome, Elisa Wagner replied, standing up. I'm just doing my job. And between us, she lowered her voice, you were very brave. Not everyone dares to stand up to a system like the one Karina and her patrons built. She said goodbye and left, leaving June with new thoughts and a sense of relief. Maybe everything would turn out all right after all. Maybe the truth would prevail. June spent the night in the cell, but no longer in despair, rather in anticipation. In the morning, she was collected and taken to Detective Sergeant Gruber's office. Silas was already there, a bit worn, with stubble on his face, but with clear eyes and a smile. June. He stepped toward her but hesitated to hug her. Are you okay? Yes, she nodded. A lawyer came to see me and explained the situation. Gruber, who was watching the reunion, cleared his throat to get their attention. So, he said in an official tone, due to new circumstances and the evidence provided by the FBI's white-collar crime division, the charges against you both are being dropped. You are free to go, but you must remain in the city until the investigation and trial are concluded. He handed them documents. Sign here. This confirms you have been informed of the decision and agree not to leave the city. June and Silas signed the papers. You can collect your belongings from the officer on duty, Gruber added. And yes, a man is waiting for you in the reception area. He introduced himself as Oscar Reuter. When they left the detective's office, they indeed saw Oscar, or Reuter now. He looked completely different than at their last meeting, in a sharp suit, clean-shaven, with the confident and calm gaze of a professional. June, Silas, he nodded to them. Good to see you free. I apologize for the necessary conspiracy and the temporary inconvenience. Inconvenience? June couldn't suppress her anger. You call an arrest and a night in a cell an inconvenience? Oscar looked at her with understanding. I know it wasn't easy, but believe me, it was the only way to ensure your safety and not jeopardize the operation. If Karina had known you were working with us, the consequences would have been far more severe than one night in a cell. June wanted to object, but knew he was right. Karina would have stopped at nothing to protect herself and her patrons. What now? Silas asked. Detective Gruber said we have to stay in the city. Yes, until the end of the investigation, Oscar confirmed. But that doesn't mean you have to be locked up. You can return to your normal lives. Only. He paused. North Star Inc. will no longer be the same. The company is under receivership. An audit will be conducted. Many employees will be questioned. And us? June asked. What about us? You are key witnesses, Oscar answered. Your testimonies will be critical in the trial. But that doesn't mean you have to put your lives on hold. On the contrary, the sooner you return to normal life, the better. He took a business card from his pocket and handed it to June. My real phone number. If problems or questions arise, call any time. June took the card. It simply read, Oscar Reuter, FBI, White Collar Crime Division. Thank you, she said, putting the card in her pocket. And one more thing, Oscar added. The material you provided us was very valuable, much more valuable than you might assume. It allowed us not only to uncover the scheme at North Star Inc., but also an entire network of similar companies through which billions of dollars were being laundered. You have done the country a great service. Silas and June looked at each other. The thought that their actions had such far-reaching consequences was simultaneously frightening and inspiring. We just wanted the truth, June said quietly. And thanks to you, the truth has prevailed, Oscar nodded. And now, if you have no further questions, I must go. Work is waiting. He shook their hands and left, leaving them alone in the reception hall of the police headquarters. "What now?" Silas asked, looking at June. She thought. Everything that had happened in the last few days had completely changed her life. The job at North Star Inc. was in the past. Her relationship with Silas? A complicated question. "I don't know," June answered honestly. "I need time to process everything, to understand what to do next." Silas nodded, understanding her feelings. "I have a suggestion," he said. "Let's start small. Let's just go get something to eat somewhere. I'm starving, and I'm sure you are too." June smiled. This simple, human approach to the situation was exactly what she needed right now. No global plans and decisions, just something simple and understandable. "Sounds good," she said. "I know a good cafe nearby." They collected their belongings from the officer on duty and left the police headquarters. The day was clear and warm, as if nature itself was celebrating their release. They walked down the street, talking about simple things: the weather, the city, how the downtown area had changed in recent years. They avoided complicated topics and painful questions. At the cafe, they ordered lunch and finally relaxed. The food was simple but seemed incredibly delicious after everything they had been through. "You know," Silas said when they had finished eating, "I have to tell you something. Something I've hidden this whole time." June tensed up. "Another secret? Another blow?" "What is it?" Silas took a deep breath. "Do you remember the fortune teller at the airport? The one who warned you about the danger and advised you to go back to the office?" "Of course," June nodded. "If it hadn't been for her, I would have flown off and never learned the truth." "That wasn't a coincidence," Silas said quietly. "I hired her. To be precise, not a fortune teller, but an actress. I knew Karina was planning something serious, but I couldn't warn you directly. She was monitoring my every move. That's why I came up with that plan." June stared at him, unable to believe her ears. You planned that? The whole story with the fortune teller?" Silas nodded. "I was afraid for you, June. Afraid that Karina would use you and set a trap for you. She had done it before with others. With other women." "So that's true?" June asked quietly. "What she said about your previous affairs with her employees?" Silas lowered his gaze. "Partially. There was one woman, 2 years ago Karina's secretary, but I didn't have an affair with her. She came to me on her own and said she had found strange documents on Karina's computer. A week later, she was fired for incompetence, and a month later, she had a car accident. From then on, I began to suspect that Karina was involved in something serious and dangerous." June fell silent, processing the information. That explained a lot. Why Silas was so cautious, why he insisted on secrecy, why he was afraid to openly oppose Karina. "And our relationship?" she finally asked. "Was that also part of the plan?" Silas shook his head. "No, I really fell in love with you, June. Yes, I approached you to check if you knew anything about Karina's schemes. But what happened after that was real. I swear to you." June looked him in the eyes, trying to see the truth. He seemed sincere, but hadn't he seemed just as sincere when he confessed his love to her before, when he planned the vacation with her, when he promised her a future together? "I don't know what to say," she confessed. "Too much has happened, too many lies and manipulations." "I understand," Silas nodded. "And I'm not asking you to make a decision right away. Just give us a chance to start over without lies and secrets," June thought. Was that possible? Was it possible to leave everything that had happened behind and start fresh? "I need time," she said finally. "Time to think everything over and decide what I want from life." "From us?" Silas nodded, accepting her decision. "Of course. I'll wait as long as it takes." They left the cafe and stopped on the street. It was getting dark. The city was starting to light up. "Where to now?" Silas asked. "Do you have a place to stay?" June thought. Her apartment. Karina's people had surely been there. It was frightening to go back there now. "I don't know," she confessed. "My apartment—" "I understand," Silas said. "Listen, I have a suggestion. I have a small apartment in another part of the city. Karina doesn't know about it. I bought it a year ago with money she didn't control. You can stay there until you've decided what to do next. And you? I'll get a hotel room or stay with friends. It's not a problem. June hesitated. Accepting his help meant becoming dependent on him again. But on the other hand, she really needed a safe place to get through this difficult time. Okay, she finally agreed. But only temporarily until I find another solution. Silas nodded, not hiding his relief. Of course. It's just a temporary solution. He called a taxi, and they drove to a quiet residential neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Silas's apartment was small but cozy. A one-bedroom apartment with modern furniture and everything one needed to live. Make yourself comfortable, he said, handing her the keys. There should be something in the fridge. I was here a week ago. I'll go and find a place to stay. June took the keys, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. Thank you, she said, for everything. And I'm sorry I doubted you. Silas smiled. Don't apologize. You had every right to. I'll give you time and space to sort out your feelings. And then we'll decide what to do next. He left, and June remained alone in the strange apartment. She showered, found a clean t-shirt of Silas's in the closet to use as a nightgown, and lay down in bed. For the first time in many days, she felt relatively safe and calm. As she fell asleep, June thought about the future, about what awaited her after all that had happened, whether it was possible to rebuild trust and start a new life, with or without Silas. 3 months passed. Life gradually returned to normal, although in a completely different way than June had imagined just 6 months ago. North Star Inc. was reorganized under the supervision of a provisional administration. Most of the executives were fired. Some were arrested as Karina's accomplices. The ordinary employees who were not involved in the schemes kept their jobs, but the company was no longer the same. The Karina Keller case attracted great public attention. She was extradited from Doha and was now awaiting her trial in custody. Along with her, several high-ranking officials and business leaders, whose names had previously dominated the front pages of the business press, were indicted. The money laundering scheme they had built proved to be far more extensive than one could have imagined. June did not return to North Star Inc. Instead, she accepted a job offer at a major auditing firm. Her experience and her involvement in uncovering the financial misconduct made her a valuable employee. Of course, there were difficulties. Some colleagues treated her with suspicion, others with excessive curiosity. But on the whole, June was satisfied with her new job. Silas and she met regularly, but they had not resumed their relationship. Too much unsaid and too much pain remained between them. It was too hard to separate the truth from the lies, the sincere feelings from the manipulations. June couldn't bring herself to trust him fully again, and Silas understood that and didn't pressure her. After the divorce, which proceeded in parallel with the criminal case, Silas decided to start completely fresh. He sold the assets that had not been seized as part of the investigation and opened a small consulting firm. The irony was that he now advised companies on matters of corporate security and combating white-collar crime, Oscar Reuter called them sometimes, to check on their well-being and to update them on the progress of the case. Thanks to the evidence they had provided and the testimonies of other witnesses, the case was as good as hopeless for the defendants. They faced long prison sentences and the confiscation of their assets. On this warm September day, June sat in a cafe waiting for Silas. They had arranged to meet to discuss the upcoming trial, where both were scheduled to testify. Silas arrived on time. He looked good, fit, confident, with a light tan from a recent trip down south. "Hello," he said, sitting down across from June. "How are you?" "Okay," she replied. "I'm a bit nervous about the trial, but otherwise, everything is fine." "Don't worry," Silas reassured her. "We'll just tell what we know. The case is practically closed. Karina and the others have already admitted their guilt and agreed to a deal with the DA's office." June nodded. She knew this from Oscar, but was still nervous. Testifying publicly in court, retelling this whole story in front of dozens of people, it wasn't easy. "By the way," Silas said, "I received an interesting offer. I was invited to join an international company as a consultant, one that specializes in uncovering financial misconduct. A 1-year contract working in Europe. Congratulations, June said sincerely. That's a great opportunity. Did you accept? I'm still thinking about it, Silas replied. It means moving to another country, starting from scratch. I don't know if I'm ready for such big changes. June understood his doubts. After everything that had happened, it would be a logical step to start a new life in a new place, but leaving everything familiar and native behind, setting off into the unknown, required courage. And you? Silas asked. Do you have plans for the future? June thought. For the past few months, she had been living day to day, without making far-reaching plans. Work, home, occasional meetings with friends. Her life was calm, but somehow incomplete. I don't know, she answered honestly. I like my job, but something is missing. Maybe change, maybe new goals. Silas looked at her attentively. You know, he said hesitantly, I could recommend you to this international company. They're not just looking for consultants, but also for financial analysts with audit experience. Your candidacy would be ideal. June raised her eyebrows in surprise. Are you suggesting I go to Europe with you? Not exactly, Silas shook his head. I'm suggesting you consider a good career opportunity, and whether we travel together or separately, that's a different question. June looked at him, trying to sort out her feelings. Part of her still loved Silas, despite all the difficulties and deceptions. Another part was afraid to trust him again, afraid of repeating the mistakes of the past. I'll think about it, she said finally. That's a serious decision. It can't be made on the spur of the moment. Silas nodded, understanding her caution. Of course. You have until the end of the month to decide. I can send them your resume, and then you'll decide everything for yourself. They continued their conversation, discussing the upcoming trial and other topics. After the cafe, Silas walked June home. She had finally decided to return to her apartment after Oscar assured her the danger was over. Thanks for the meeting, Silas said as they stood in front of the entrance. And think about the offer. It's really a good opportunity regardless of us. June nodded. I'll think about it, really, and thanks for the suggestion. They said goodbye, and June went into her apartment. She sat on the sofa and thought about Silas's proposal. Moving to Europe, new job, new life. It was tempting, especially now that so many memories and associations tied her to this city, to North Star Inc., to the story of deception and betrayal. But was she ready to work near Silas again? To see him every day? To collaborate with him? And above all, was she ready to trust him again? June went to the window and looked out at the city, bathed in autumn gold. So much had happened in the last 6 months. So many shocks, discoveries, changes. She was no longer the naive June who wanted to go on vacation with her boss's husband. She had become stronger, wiser, more cautious. Maybe that's precisely why she could now make a decision based not on emotions, but on sober calculation and self-awareness. June picked up her phone and dialed Silas's number. I think, she said when he answered, I'd like to know more about this company and the opportunities there. Can you send them my resume? Of course, a smile could be heard in Silas's voice. I'll do it today. But, June added, this doesn't mean that we'll be together again. I'm still not sure. I understand, Silas replied, and I respect your decision. Whatever you choose, I will support you. They said goodbye, and June hung up the phone. She felt a strange calm and confidence. For the first time in a long time, she looked to the future with hope, not fear. Life went on, despite all the shocks and disappointments. And who knew? Maybe the new page of this life would be brighter and happier than the previous one. Maybe all these trials were necessary to lead her to her true happiness. June smiled and opened the window, letting the fresh autumn air and the sounds of the city into the apartment. She was ready for new beginnings, for new challenges, ready to continue writing her story, without lies and manipulations. Her very own story, in which she herself decided what to do and whom to trust. And even though this story was just beginning, June felt that it would be much happier than the previous one, because now she knew the value of truth and believed in herself more than ever. Thank you for following Clara's stories. If you enjoyed this story and would like to hear or read more gripping true stories from life, then please subscribe to Clara's Stories. Every story we tell requires a lot of time for research, preparation, and narration. With a small donation, you can help secure the work on further exciting stories and make them accessible to everyone. Every dollar counts and brings us one step closer to the next narrative. Thank you for your support, M.